I give the floor now to Professor Brezis from Bar-Ilan University.
Very much. Thank you for inviting me.
For 15. Okay.
The subject of this paper is already in the title. Why do students migrate and where do they migrate? Why is it an interesting question at all? Because in the last decade, the migration of workers is an important phenomenon, but in fact, in the last decade, the flows of students has grown very rapidly and even is becoming more important than the flows of those seeking work. If you look at the data presented by The Economist just this month, so this is the data until 2006, and you see that the immigration of students is greater than the immigration of workers. And for instance, if we look at the data for the UK, in 2010, on 600,000 visas entry to the UK, 400,000 were given to students. So this becomes a very important phenomenon of migration. If we look at the data on migration, and I know that this is difficult to see, there are many differences between countries, and I would like to give it not as immigration of students as a percent of the total number of students, and the countries in which you have a lot of migration. In the non-OECD, it will be Lebanon with 10%, Morocco 14%, and in the OECD, Iceland 21%, Ireland 10%, and the Slovak Republic 11%, when the other countries are between 1% and 4%. So, what I'm going to show today is to explain, in fact, what are the elements really influencing where do students migrate. And when we can think about what can influence them, we can think about two main elements, variables, maybe wages, because when they move as students, maybe they're going just to continue and stay there, or maybe it is quality of higher education. So the question I'm asking is, do they migrate to countries with high quality of education or with high wages? But you could, of course, say, well, that's probably not a very interesting question, because maybe they are very much correlated. So the first thing I will show you is empirical regularities, that countries with high education are not necessarily with high wages. Then I will explain I will have a theoretical model, and then we will do some regressions. So are countries with high wages the one with high quality in higher education? No, not necessarily. Here you have a bunch of countries that we are looking at, which are the countries in the Bologna process, and you see that you have main differences between the countries with high wages and the countries in blue with high quality. Of course, you could say that's nice, but let's have a correlation and let's see really what we get. So the correlation is 0.34. Between 0.33 and 0.34, 35, this is what we have from the data. It's not very high. So, in fact, students will have to choose. Do they prefer to go to countries with high wages or with high quality? Now you can ask the question, what does it mean, quality of a country? We can probably understand what is the quality of a university, but what does it mean, quality of a country, of higher education of a country? So in the past, in many papers, in fact there are not a lot of papers on the subject of migration of students, they were looking at budget. But we know that there are countries with huge budget, maybe corruption, maybe whatever the reason, and it's not effective. So the last 2-3 years, Philippe Aguillon from Harvard, working on the field also of quality of higher education, decided that he will look at what is called the index of the top 100, top 200, and top 500, meaning what it means to have a good quality of university is in fact what is the quality of your best universities. You cannot like it, but this is what today some economists are starting to do. And if you remember the discussion yesterday about Italy, I will just turn it for a moment, I completely agree. Italy have good universities. Italy even have very good universities. But Italy do not have the best universities. You see how much they have at the top? 0. And this is what is influencing what is happening. You can be very good, but this is not enough. It seems that there are some subjects in economics where there is a main difference between the top and the rest. Not in everything. For instance, in cars, you can have good, better, and you see that there is a continuity in demand. Not sometimes for some of the labor market, and this was the idea that is very known in the labor market, what is called winners take it all. This is the idea of Rosen, and it has changed the way we look at the labor market and the theory of labor market. So we have to adapt it also to the market for education. Winners will take it all. Italian universities are very good, but they have to be the best if they want to take students. And therefore, my paper, what I will show, explains very well the results that we got from the AlmaLaurea. There are few foreign students who decide to enroll in Italian universities. The result is a recurrent negative balance. My paper will explain why, despite that they have good universities and very good universities, they don't have the best. And this explains it. So I continue. Yes, I will have a concentration effect. I will have top universities, top countries with the highest quality of education. And what will be interesting is that they are going to take the students, not the one with top high wages. And I will define I will take top 5 wages and in the same way top 5 quality of education. Now, is it true? Meaning, it's a claim, but is it true really that students are moving to the top countries? So you see that by wages, in fact, the students are moving, only 16% of the students are moving to the countries with top high wages. But if we look by education, it is 67%. So therefore, I conclude that 16% move to countries with the highest wage and 67% move to countries with the highest quality of education. Those are just empirical regularities. Of course, I'm going to show you regression soon. But first, we were interested also to have some sort of model to explain what is happening. And what is, I suppose, new in this paper is that we said, just a minute. We have some papers speaking about migration of students, on one hand. On the other hand, we have a lot of papers speaking on the migration of workers. But it's the same people at different time in their life. They don't have such a dichotomy. what we have to do is to have one model in 2 steps. First, they will decide where they study, and after they will decide where to work. And you have in fact here to take a 2-step decision. And you cannot just divide and say, okay, I'm making a model with students, just a minute. 10 years later, they will take a decision about work. Maybe they have just integrated these 2 questions together. And when we integrate these 2 questions together, we find some 2 propositions which I think are interesting, and I'm going to speak about them in 2 minutes. I will just explain quickly the model. We have benefits, meaning it's a cost-benefit analysis of students which will become in few years workers. So, at some point they will work, so they want to know the wages where they will work. And what is very important, and we are all here about human capital, students are aware that quality of education varies across countries, and that the higher the quality of education, the higher the human capital they are acquiring. And this is what most people yesterday were saying, that human capital is not homogeneous. Human capital is very heterogeneous, and all the work taking human capital as one number are just not getting anywhere. So we will have in the returns a function of wages and quality. Now on the costs. What are the costs? Well, there are psychological costs of moving. This is what we took from the literature, and there are also financial and compatibility costs. Now what is interesting on the psychological cost is that there is a new, completely new theory by Akerlof, Nobel Prize, and Rachel Cranton, and they've started to develop in macroeconomics a whole new line of thinking which is called identity economics. They've just published a book, and it's based on their papers. And they say that one element that we don't take enough into consideration when we make the maximization of what people do is their identity. In other words, their culture. So when people move, they will have what we call the phenomenon of acculturation, which means that they will have a cost if culture is very different between the 2 countries, and this cost will be function of the difference of culture that is CU in our model. So this is the first cost we have. And of course, the Bologna process is one way to reduce this type of cost in some sort. The second type of cost that we have is that you can move to countries maybe with tuition fees. And also, you can have very different type of higher education, and you can have some compatibility cost. And of course, question of language, and it can be also question of distance. So those are the costs that are included in the paper, and we get this proposition. That when you look at the 4 different strategies, due to the Bologna process, which is reducing the cost of migration as a student, migration of students will concentrate into the countries with the highest quality of higher education, and in the paper you can find the proof. Now what is interesting also, and since yesterday we spoke a lot about brain drain, and I'm going to speak again about it, a pure brain drain strategy. What do I'm left with very little time, so I will move rapidly. A pure brain drain strategy is when you have already learned, and then you decide, do I move to another country? Well, this is suboptimal. Usually, if this is what you are going to do, you will try to move before, meaning, for instance, for your graduate studies or before. And we show that this is in fact optimal, or to stay in your country. But the pure brain drain strategy then becomes suboptimal. Okay, I will go very quickly. okay, so this is in fact what the regression we have. You see that quality of education, or the difference in quality of education, has a significant and positive effect on the probability of migration, wages not. But what is interesting is that when we add our concentration effect, well, I don't have time, we show that, I will maybe quickly, because I have some arguments with some people here. So first, culture is influencing negatively as we wanted. Tuition fees. We are so afraid to increase tuition fees to students. Well, they prefer to go to countries with higher tuition fees when it is also higher quality. So we should think about it. Distance, language, etc. all goes on the same direction. Okay. The second regression is when we add the top 5 and wage 5, and you see that countries will move to the top 5 in quality and not in wages. And this is very, very significant. So it means that there is really a concentration effect. Yes, I have the time here. So let's conclude. This past decade, cross-national migration of young people has become an important issue in the policy arena for two main reasons. The first one is, of course, the Bologna process. We want to understand if this is good. The second one, which is not less important, is that there is an increasing global competition for talents. In the past, the elite of most countries were educating in their own countries. Today, there is an element that is common now for most of the elite, is that they share a common education and they have attended the same elite universities which are not in their home countries. In a paper on the elite, I have shown that from the people going to Davos, which is the elite, more than 50% are all coming from the top 50 universities. So you have a lot of concentration. This paper has shown that high quality of education is important and then there is concentration. Well, these are not good news for the Bologna process. And they are even worse news for developing countries in the border of the European Union. Because what will happen? They will try to acquire higher education in the top countries in terms of quality of education, and brain drain will increase. But I'm not one-sided. There are also very good news. Because in order to develop, countries need bright people at the head of the political and economic leadership. So the Bologna process will permit that the bright people from developing countries, in which higher education usually is not of high quality, will move and attend the best universities. But the question, of course, is, will they return to their countries? Well, that was the subject yesterday when people spoke about brain drain, brain gain, by Stark, Dokier and Rappaport. But now there is a new theory that was started by Dokier and Delacroix. It's the multiple equilibria in brain drain. What you will have is that either there is a possibility of multiple equilibria. Either there are some forces which will lead the young people to return to their countries, or if you don't have such exogenous shock, you will have the flow of young people which will increase, and the country can be caught in a vicious circle leading to some form of poverty trap. So, what can we do? Because maybe we want really for those countries that they will permit their elite to come to countries with high quality, yes. But one possible shock that could lead to this improved equilibrium will be the requirement for exciting students to go back for a few years to their home countries. What I suggest is that if they return, you will then alter the existence of multiple equilibria, and this exogenous shock would then permit to have high wages and high growth and a virtuous circle. Therefore, and this is my last remark, this paper strongly recommends that with the creation of the European higher education area and free flow of students, the EU place some restrictions on these free flows from countries neighboring Europe. The way to do it is that for some years they will have to go back to their countries, even if it is difficult to implement. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this very suggestive and questioning communication. First of all, this is very interesting because sometimes we have empirical feelings and they don't fit with scientific realities you expose very well. And another important issue is that with a lot of vicious circles, we propose to build a virtuous circle. Is the way of making it possible is to limit, or on the contrary, to enhance countries, to have better universities, better income, better budgets, and to become really positive partners in the Euro-Med region. We will discuss about it, I'm sure, with our discussant.